You were born in Montgomery County?
Montgomery County, Franconia Township.
Okay. And go ahead, just give me a rundown of your parents, the early years, what your father did for a living, and your mother. Did they come over from the old country?
Only my father. My mother was born here.
Okay.
My father spoke High German, and I did tell you that. And he also went to Czech school. 4 years they went to Czech school, and 4 years they went to German school.
So he came from an area in Germany that was right next to the Czech border?
Yeah.
Right. So
No, he came from Czechoslovakia side, Bohemia side.
Okay, okay.
Which was near to the German border.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Erzgebirge, it's called in German. Means ore, you know, iron ore, but ore mountains is the English translation.
Okay.
Erzgebirge.
What was your father's name? Your father and mother?
My father was John, but he was also Hans, and he was also Johann. They're all German for the same, they mean the same thing, Johann, John.
Okay. And your mother's name?
Mother's name was, her signal name was Matilda Sell.
Okay.
S-E-L-L.
Okay.
She was born in Morewood, Pennsylvania.
Oh, she was? Okay.
Montgomery County.
And was it your grandfather that came over from?
My grandfather came, my two uncles, Frank and Steve, came first. No, grandfather came first by himself. His name was Stefan, Steve or Stefan Forman, and he worked in a pottery factory in Trenton, New Jersey. That was his profession. He was a pottery maker.
Okay.
And he was here a whole year, and with the intention of moving his family here, but he didn't like it. He didn't like it. Oh, they work too fast, and they want you, when you do so many an hour, then you're supposed to do so many more an hour, you know, and he revolted to that system, so he came back. But he must have talked enough about this country to get his two oldest boys to come to America on their own.
And one was your father?
What?
One was your father?
No, my father was number 3.
Oh, okay, okay.
And they were here mostly to, my grandfather was not opposed to, like the Mennonites here are opposed to war, and they're pacifists, more or less.
Right.
And my grandfather wasn't opposed to that. He was just, I didn't raise these boys for cannon fodder. That was his mentality. And also, he didn't like the Catholic Church.
Okay.
The Catholic Church walked up and down the street and Guten Tag, Frau so-and-so. And wherever my grandfather worked in the pottery in Eichwald. Eichwald, that's another German name, but it's in Bohemia. Eichwald means Eich is oak. Oak. Okay. Wald is forest. Oak forest is literal translation of the Eichwald. There was a big, still there today, a big pottery. Make all kinds of pottery. Well, he would have to work all week to buy a pair of shoes for his boy.
Oh my.
And he said, so he encouraged his boys to go somewhere else. And yet my dad, number 3 boy, it was Steve, Frank, and John, first 3. And he went to the mayor's town. I have a map. Teplice, that's Czechish, or Czechoslovakian. And that's where he got a job in a hotel. And Teplice was a resort town.
Okay.
Hot water coming out of this,
Okay.
you know.
Okay.
And there they would, people would come from all over to bathe in this water. There's some here in the western states, and people do that. And
Okay.
he got a job in a hotel
Okay.
as a waiter.
Just wanted to make sure it was still on. Okay.
As a waiter, you know, waiting on tables and customers. And he liked that very much. His mother would walk from Duby to Teplice, or Duby is Eichwald. Duby is the Czech name of the town. Eichwald is the German name of the same town.
Huh.
And she would walk once a week with his clean clothes and all the way to Teplice, which was about 8 miles. And back, bring him fresh clothes to work for the week. And my daddy's plan was the rule was there that to be a head waiter where you get paid, up to 3 years, the first 3 years you don't get paid, you only get tips. That was that time. And he liked that, but to be a head waiter, you had to know 3 languages.
Wow.
So he made arrangements when he was through there, where in Teplice, he went to London and he got a job. Because he was experienced, he could get a job, although he couldn't speak English or very little. And there he was 2 years. He was not in a hotel, or he was in a rich family's home, and he was like a butler, or they had a butler, and they had, you know, a lot of servants, and that's where he learned English. And while he was there, his 2 older brothers, I told you, went to America, and they landed in Baltimore, and then they took a job in Minnesota, shocking wheat.
Wow. From Baltimore to Minnesota.
That's the only thing they could get a job at. But in 4 weeks, that job was over. You know, you only last so long. So they looked in the paper and, I guess we ought to go to the West Coast. All right. Got on the train, headed west, and Steve, Uncle Steve, he was the oldest in the German regiment. There's always the oldest is the boss.
Right.
And Frank, he didn't want to go, but, well, you got to go. Steve says, you got to go. So they got on the train, and Steve had bought himself a new pair of gloves. And they were going down a clickety-clack, heading west, and he couldn't find the one glove. Where's that glove? And they looked, and they looked, and they looked, and they couldn't find it. So he opened the window and threw the other one out. No use having one. Then down the road, they found the first one.
Ah, I see.
I taught him a lesson not to be so quick to throw stuff away. Well, what are we going to do out west? Well, they got as far as the Cascades in Washington State, and there the electric company was building a line from wherever they generated to wherever they needed it. Solid rock. Took them 1 day for 2 men to dig a hole.
Now, what years?
1907, 8.
1907 or 8? Okay.
10 in there. My dad came in 1911. He came here.
Okay.
But anyway, then that job was over, and they landed up in Seattle. And they bought a paper. All right, what's the paper say? Oh, the German hierarchy, he had an anniversary, and he had to do something for his people, you know. Well, he announced that anyone who left the country that didn't want to serve in the military, he could come home without any reparations, no harm done. He could come back. So Uncle Steve, we're going back. Frank says, no, we belong here. Oh, well, Steve won. And they got another train from San Francisco all the way to, well, I tell you, they took a boat from Seattle to San Francisco.
Okay.
In the Pacific. And I think maybe there they got the paper. But anyway, they got a train back to Baltimore, ticket home to...
Got on a boat and went back.
They went back. Okay. Meantime, my dad is in London, and these rich people, they had a place like here, the people have a cabin, you know.
Okay.
Well, they had a place up in Scotland or someplace, and they would go up there.
This is your dad now?
That's my dad
okay.
with the family, you know.
Okay.
He worked for. But in the meantime, while they're going back to Europe, my dad's in England, so they miss him, you know, they don't see him. They wrote once in a while, but not much. And then one day my dad was at home, and then the door knocked, and he went, and there was Frank, his brother. What are you doing here? Well, he said, I'm going to come here and learn a little English, a little more English, get a job and learn English, and then I'm going back. And you forget that going to France. See, the idea was my dad was supposed to 2 years in England, then go to France and learn French for 2 years, then go back to Teplitz and be a head waiter, you know, then he'd get...
All that just to be a head waiter?
What?
All that schooling just to be a head waiter?
Be a head waiter.
Wow.
And anyway, he told my dad, don't do that. Head over there. That's where the opportunities are. How did he know? I don't know. Maybe the angels of the Lord or somebody told him. I don't know.
Well, back in 1910, that's where the opportunity was.
Yeah, they weren't religious people, not at all. And anyway, Pop made up his mind. Well, Frank thinks that he was there, and I'm going to do that. So he got a job on a ship line that goes to New York. So he worked his way across this ocean. And when he got to New York and the boat went back, Pop was missing. You know, he didn't show up. Well, he never said whether they ever looked for him or whether. I think it happened pretty often that people would get a job to come here, and then when the boat went back, they were not around. So that's what my dad did. Then he worked in Manhattan. There was a building at the end of Brooklyn Bridge, right at the end. He took me there once. Brooklyn Bridge, called the New York World Building. And the New York World was a newspaper like the New York Times and the New York Times. It's not existing anymore. The building's gone now. But when we were there in 1946, 6, 7 after the war was over, and he took me, showed me where it was. And we couldn't go in; it was locked. It was then already up for sale or whatever, and so. But he got a job there, and every day he worked nights in the restaurant. They had their own restaurant on the 16th floor of the World Building, and he worked up there, and he liked that because there wasn't much activity at night, you know, in the restaurant, whatever. They needed one guy, and he got that job. And there was only 6 or 7 people working in the whole building at night. And he would walk the Brooklyn Bridge every morning and every night, you know, and he lived in Brooklyn, but he'd walk that bridge to his job. And they had a phone. The guy and the guys downstairs could call the restaurant and order a sandwich or coffee or whatever they wanted. And so this guy called and told my dad, I told you this before, about the Titanic.
Go ahead, tell it again.
Anyway, when he brought the sandwich down, the guy on the teletype, that's what my dad called it. It was some kind of a, you know, it's pretty self.
So this was about 1912 then?
Yeah, 11 or 12.
Because the Titanic sank in 12, didn't it?
12 or 15 or
Was it? I'm not sure.
somewhere in there. Yeah. He said, put that aside, some very important news coming, very important.
Okay.
Can't eat my sandwich. So, Pop, what kind of news can be important, you know? So he stayed there, and that was, my dad was one of the first in the United States who was not connected with the news media, who knew that the Titanic was sinking.
Okay.
That it hit an iceberg, and it was sinking. And oh my, that can't be. It's unsinkable. It was It was a maiden voyage, and that can't be. Well, it was. And from then on, somewhere after that, then the rest of the family came to America. My grandfather and his wife, my grandmother, and then after my dad was a sister, Anna, and then was another brother, Fred or Ferdinand, and then the last one was a boy, Vincent, and a very strange family. Vincent was the youngest, got married first. Uncle Steve was the oldest, got married last. Neither one had any children. Steve had no children. Fred had no children. Vince had no children. Frank and Anna stayed single, lived and took care of mother. And when I came on the scene, they came. So anyway.
Now you said yesterday when I was here that you're the only child that had children of your own?
Yeah.
And none of your brothers and sisters did, right?
I had no brothers or sisters.
That's it. You have no brothers or sisters.
And my uncles, none of them had any
children, right?
All my first cousins were on my mother's side.
Right, right.
And there was none on my daddy's side.
Right.
So by that time, the Formanics came from Europe. I don't know where they lived, in New York City somewhere, but my grandfather always wanted to be on a farm. He had this asthma from the dust in the porcelain factory, and he thought in the outside would be better. Well, they watched the papers and this and that, and they found a place in New Jersey, in the Pine Barrens, of all places. So they found a farm there on the edge or whatever, and you could, they pay rent if you wanted, and then buy it if you wanted, or whatever. So they looked at it, yeah, and they didn't come back. They went there They stayed there. But my dad went back to New York. And then he, to be closer to his family, he got a job in Philadelphia. And that was a job, he went after the cricket clubs and the golf clubs and those kind of people, because they tipped better. He knew where the tips were. So he was working, and one day the knock on the door. Well, there's my mom and dad. They come from I thought you lived in New Jersey. Well, we did, but the mosquitoes got so bad. It was 4th of July, and we couldn't stand them. So we're here. put us up with Annie and Vince and Fred with them. There's 5 people in that little flat, whatever he had in Kensington. You heard of Kensington,
yes.
Next to Frankfurt in Philadelphia.
Right.
Anyway.
And what year was this?
This was about 1912 or 13.
Because you came to Pennsylvania in 1911 or 10.
He came to America in 1911.
1911.
Yeah, and I wish I knew the name of the boat. He told me the name of the boat, but I didn't write it down. I don't know the name. But anyway, his family was out in them barrens, and the mosquitoes came, and they described them as that big. Well, you know, anyway. So we can't stay here. Oh, all right. So they got a neighbor with a wagon, a horse and wagon, and he put their few trunks on and what they had, and he says, "We're going over to John's. We're going over. John is over across the Delaware in Kensington." And so he took them to Camden. He's Ausländer. My people were, Ausländer means, you know, immigrants or whatever.
Outsiders?
Outsiders, that's the right product. And they got to the dock where the ferry is. Oh, it's the 4th of July. The ferry don't run today. Oh, what are we going to do? Well, unload the wagon, and they slept there overnight on the dock in Camden, New Jersey. The 5, and Pop not leaving, knowing they're coming. It was crowded in Kensington. Imagine a little flat with 6 people in there.
Right.
I can't tell you where Frank was. I'm guessing it was still in New York City, Uncle Frank, the one missing out of that bunch. When he came, he got a job, also a job in New York, but what it was or what he did. So anyway, my grandfather pushed to live in the country, get a farm and so on. Well, they watched the paper and they watched the paper. At that time, there were still farms for sale in Philadelphia County.
Wow.
On Route 30.
Oh my goodness.
On Route, not 30, but 1. Route 1 goes through Philadelphia.
Right.
Out by the Sears Roebuck, out in there were farms. But they were already then selling by the square foot.
Wow.
Because they were along the highway,
Along the
and
highway.
a lot of traffic and commerce. So they looked further and further, and they seen one, and 2 of them in Souderton. Oh, well, we ought to go look at them. Well, all right. So on Pop's day off, they got a ticket at, I guess they took the L from Kensington. The L went to meet up with the Reading. The Reading had a station on North Broad Street. And first Reading Terminal and North Broad Street, and then was Jenkintown and Lansdale and all them places. They got a ticket to go to Lansdale, and from there they walked the 5 miles to where the farm was. And we got to be there soon. Somebody in Lansdale told them how to walk and how to go. And they came to a farm, and I can show you the farm today. It's on Schoolhouse Road. There was a Landis lived there, and he was on the porch rocking. And they stopped and they said, "Where's the Hansel farm?" "Oh," he says, "not too far. You go up here, cross the bridge, make a right, the first farm in there." Aha. Okay, so they walked up there, and by God, there's an old man comes out. And, "You Mr. Hansel?" "Yeah." "Well, what do you have to sell us? We're interested in your farm." "Oh, all right. Well," he said, "you'll have to go see Ben Aldafer. He's the realtor in Souderton." And
You have a tremendous memory. I'm blown away by all this information that you remember from years ago.
yeah,
And the stories that were.
Daddy, all he did was talk
About it.
all day long. He would talk to me.
Okay.
There was never a silent moment.
Okay.
And I heard some of them stories. I heard over and over and over. But they met Mr. Hansel, chickens all over, on the real farm. And he was a widower. And he sent them to Souderton. And the price, they had the money. Not then, but
How many acres were in this farm?
78.
78 acres.
78 acres, yeah. About 65 tillable, about 60 or 65.
Let me guess. $1,000 or less?
Oh, the bill was $5,000.
5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in that
In
area.
1915.
Yeah, in that area,
Yeah.
right, yes.
And, well, all right, we're interested. If you say he lives in Souderton, yeah, you go in Broad Street and right there. The big house on Broad Street, I know where it is. It's on Weil Avenue and West Broad Street in Souderton. Used to be, in my day, just Dr. Wise's office. But that's where Ben Oliver had his realty office. So they walked in there, and we would like to buy the Hansel farm. Oh, yeah, well. So they give him down money or money, I don't know. My dad had the money, and my Uncle Frank in New York, they had saved it. They had enough money to pay for that farm, and they did. Those two guys paid cash for that farm. And then the neighbors all wanted it. We had 7 Mennonite adjoining neighbors around that farm.
Wow.
7 that we joined with,
Okay.
The Souders, the Kratches, the Landises, the Wiles. That's it, Souder. There were 2 Souders. And they all wanted that farm, but they would only pay $3,500.
Right.
Forman's came along with an extra $1,500. Wow, my goodness. So they bought it, and then they moved the whole family up there, except my dad. He stayed working in Philadelphia, waiting tables, and he stayed there. And well, the rest is...
How many languages did he learn, your father?
Only English and Pennsylvania Dutch.
And Pennsylvania Dutch.
And that had a little bit High German mixed in it, like the 35ers.
Okay, let's go back to the farm.
Yeah, back to the farm. Well, the family moved to the farm, and then actually Hansel lived there with them for a while. The old guy that worked the farm, or I don't know. I guess it was his money. I don't know where the money went, if it were sons or other people that there was no mortgage, I know that. But anyway, then Uncle Steve is the oldest one who engineered the trip back to Europe from San Francisco and all that. The oldest of the boys. He was appointed by my dad and Frank to be the farmer, to run the show. Well, what do you do? Well, you just watch what the other farmers are doing, and that's probably what you ought to be doing. And he was a outgoing guy. Uncle Steve was my favorite uncle. Let's see, his birthday was I forgot that. No, April the 5th. April the 5th.
Wow.
Anyway.
Let me guess. The first year was a learning experience.
Yeah, well, it got worse.
Oh, okay.
And Uncle Steve was a storyteller. He was the first to join the Mennonite church.
Okay.
There was all those people I told you were Mennonites.
Right, Landis's.
And they were neighbors, and they were friendly, and they were, so that part I don't know very little about, how he got there at that church and so on. But they appointed him after he was a member. I'm sure he had to be a member, or they wouldn't let him teach. He taught the old ladies' class. He was just a young man, but he taught the old ladies' class because he was fluent in High German, and they still spoke German. In fact, when I went there to church as a boy, there were some German sermons and some in English. And that's how he got that job. But he lost his job. Now, not the teaching job, but the job on the farm. He was I told you he was a storyteller. And he could make up a story like I'm making up here. Mm-hmm. I hope not. But anyway, he would take milk to the creamery, maybe a can and a half of milk. Well, some guys had 4 cans, some had 5 cans. Why you only have 1.5, you know? Well, that's all the cow's given, and the cows are high and this and that, you know. And you gotta milk them, you know, this way. Oh, whatever. He took the milk to the creamery, which was only a mile away. Still there, the building is still there. Forman's Creamery on Lower Road in Franconia Township, just west of JBS. You know who JBS is? They're the 4th largest packer, beef packer in the United States.
Oh, okay.
Used to be A.F. Moyer. And I farmed a farm before I moved up here. But Holman's Creamery is still there. And I even think there's a Holman that still owns it. But it hasn't produced milk or butter or cheese or anything.
So what's the closest large town to where the farm was?
Souderton.
Souderton.
That was the address, too.
Okay.
That was the address, Souderton. And the mailman had a 35 Ford winning. But we were Ausländer. We were
outsiders.
Outsiders. We didn't qualify because they were not citizens. They they couldn't vote. And so the mailman turned around at the neighbors and left. And we had to go all the years, and even I did. Whenever we went to town, I was told to go to the post office and get the mail. We were general delivery up until, maybe 1945 or 46 or 48, somewhere in there.
When did you get your citizenship? Did you have to go through any kind of...
I didn't, but none of them did.
Okay.
They were here, I guess, illegally. None of them then. Well, I think maybe, Fred and Vince, the 2 youngest ones, I'm sure. See, Vince, the youngest, he still went to one-room school, where I went to one-room school.
Okay.
But the Northeast Extension took that little school away. And if you know where it is, I could show you exactly where that school was. But anyway, so Frank had the most money in that farm. So he said to Dad one day, "You're going to go up and run that farm, and Steve is going to come back to the city and earn his money here somewhere, do whatever he wants to do. But he's not running that farm, it's going to pieces." Well, Pop didn't want that, and there was a lot of friction that time, but, taken away from Steve what he liked to do, he liked to go.
What did he grow on 65 acres?
Hay and 1 field of corn and 1 field of oats and one field
What
of
did he sell for revenue, for income?
milk,
The milk,
little milk, and
cheese?
no,
Just milk?
no, just milk. Yeah, they had some cows, milked some cows, I don't know, 6 or 8 or not more than that.
Well, at least they didn't have a mortgage to pay,
I
right?
don't think, no.
And no taxes, no
No.
property tax back then, right?
Well, no, I didn't think,
No, I don't think so, no.
no. But my dad and Frank, they paid the taxes, I'm sure of that. So he had a free ride, but he screwed up. So they sent him back to Philly, and Pop moved up there. And then he started, and that was the time they started to grow potatoes in that part of it, Montgomery County. And so you wrote Matilda Self.
Right.
But her name was Gutschall when that was her mother's name. My mother's name was Mary Gutschall.
Oh,
I wrote you have that wrong.
okay.
I gave it to you wrong.
Mary
That was-
Gutschall, not Matilda's.
Yeah. Mary. G-O-D.
Oh, G-O-D.
S-H-A-L-L.
Okay, and she was born,
She was born in October the 28th, 1998. And my daddy was born on November the 5th, 1891.
you have a lot of November birth, like October, November, you're November 1st. Johan's November 5th.
We all had our birthdays in about the same week.
Right.
So that way, it was once and done, it was over for another year. Anyhow, Pop went to farming, and he was no carpenter or nothing. He didn't work outside. What did he do? Well, he watched what his neighbors did, and he started to grow potatoes, and he had good luck. They had it was 1927, I think it was. They had the high yield.
You haven't even been born yet.
No.
Okay.
1927, they had the high yield of potatoes in Montgomery County.
Wow.
And they were members of the Pennsylvania Potato Growers. And when we moved, I had a little emblem of Pennsylvania, you know how that goes,
Right.
this and then.
Right.
I had that in gold, and it disappeared.
Oh.
So they got into the potato business, and every Sunday, the Wilds were neighbors. They were more progressive people, and the Dursteins were more progressive. And William Gutschall was my mother's brother. He lived about 5 miles. But they would get together on a Sunday afternoon and look at each other's potato fields. How bad the bugs was and how bad it ought to rain, or you know what how farmers do. And then one Sunday, my uncle Will, he said to my dad, "John, you need a wife." Yeah, I guess I do. Well, I got a sister that needs a husband. Oh, well. That was the beginning of my wife, my mom, and my daddy's courtship.
Okay.
And that happened to be sometime in the summertime before the potatoes. It had to be, July, or at least June, July or something. And anyway, the first date wasn't until March I found out later, the first date they had was in March. My mother worked for that time as a domestic in Lansdale with the Swardley Insurance Company. And they was the president, he was his president, and he had a wife and two boys. And Mom was supposed to watch them, and bring them up right and all that stuff. But my mother was one of the first single girls in the Mennonite department in our county or township that had an automobile. one of the first,
Okay.
Model T. And you know the old saying, when the bands wore out going uphill, then you turned the thing around and you put it in reverse. You had to hold the pedal down all the time.
Okay.
That was two speeds, high and low, and then the third pedal was reverse. You would turn the vehicle around and back up the hill till you got up there until it wasn't so steep. Then you could turn around again and go forward. That's how them old Model Ts worked.
Wow.
Well, anyway, they must have wrote together. They didn't have phones, I know that. And anyway, she was expecting my dad to come on a Saturday evening, and he knew where she lived in Lansdale with these people she lived in with them. And my mom was Pennsylvania Dutch, and they weren't fancy people, but they were, these Auslanders were, you know, the holes, the screen door had holes in where the chickens went in and out, you know, and
I see.
the Auslander was pretty
A little sloppy.
Pretty sloppy. Well, that's a good word. And she wondered, how in the world is he going to get to Lansdale, you know? Is he going to walk here, or is he going to... She didn't ask him. She just said, well, yeah, I'll see you, or whatever. And he pulled in with a brand new 1928 Buick, brand new.
Wow.
Knocked her right off her feet.
The potato crop must have been pretty good.
Crop must have been pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm sure he didn't borrow the money because he was too frugal for that. But anyhow, that was, and then by October they were married. But you have to remember, she was, by that time she was 28.
They couldn't wait around too long. She was 28 at the time.
She was, he was 36.
Well, if they want to have a family, they can't wait too many years, right?
And she was 1930. No, 28.
28.
She was married on her 28th birthday in October 1928.
Right.
Yeah. That's how it's easy to remember her birthday and all that. She was married on her birthday. And yeah, and then it took 2 years for me to come along, and I never asked the question. Maybe I did, how's come there weren't some more, you know, but there's never any more.
You were the only child.
Yeah, I was the only child. Yeah.
And you remember being in the bassinet.
I remember being in a bassinet. How old I was, I don't know, but I rolled, and somebody caught me, and I guess it was my mom, that I didn't roll on the floor. You know how kids, when they at a certain age, they start to. Well, I remember that. But the house is gone, the barn is gone. That's a real sad part of the story. The house, John Hart, I told you about John Hart. If you ever get to Burnfield, I'll give you his number and he'll come and show you. He restored an old country grocery store, and it looks just like he did 50 years ago. And it's got fans in the different areas, fans bigger than that, run by V-belts.
Wow.
Big long V-belts. Now where he got them, I don't know if that's. And then there's a place where that rod goes in this basement where that power comes from to run them.
Now, John Hart, did you say?
Hart, yeah. Let's see if I have his name.
H-A-R.
H-A-R-T, yeah.
And he ran a...
He bought the place and he restored it, but no, it's not John, it's Mike. Mike. John is related to him, but he's a...
So he bought the farm?
Huh?
He bought the farm?
No, the Mascara, the number 4 or 5 garbage guy in the United States bought it.
Oh, okay.
Mascara.
Well, who's Mike Hart then?
He's a local guy. He's an antique lover, and he, you know, tinkers and he lives there.
So he's somebody you got to know.
He told me there was only 3 houses in Montgomery County that had a style, and he told me that a dozen times, the name of the style of that house. And we believe that there was a sawmill on that farm. Then later, before the Formans had it, when there was only 3 owners since 1792, was John Althouse, and then after that was a come on, Henry. And then was this one I can't think of, Schwenk. And was a Schwenk owned it, and then this Hansel owned it. There was only 4 owners from 1792 or even before, till my dad took that farm over, and my dad's family. So, yeah, there was a sawmill there, and there was a mill race, and the Formans filled that all in and farmed it. And it was, but it always gave the best corn of any field around. It was near the creek, and it had well watered. And
so how long did you, or your father and you, I would assume, farm that place? How many years?
They came there in 1915, and I moved away in 1964.
And came here?
Came here, yeah.
But you were farming down there that whole time?
Oh, no, I was born in 1930.
But I'm saying from 1930 till you moved up here, you were farming down in Montgomery County?
Yeah, well, I helped my dad, yeah.
Okay.
I worked for Long Acres Poultry, and I worked the most for the Hagee Bus Company. I took tours to New York and to Washington and to Colorado, Chicago sometimes, not much. But
so you were a driver like me?
Yeah. Yeah, Philadelphia was.
You did the bus tours?
Yeah.
All right.
Philadelphia. Washington used to be, I dreaded it. I dreaded Washington. I tell you how much we got. We'd work 3 days, and we would get up at 5 o'clock and go to the bus garage, and usually 2 or 3 buses. We'd drive to Doylestown and get the senior class, and then we'd head to Washington. And the first stop was on Route 40. Beyond Wilmington was the Clemente's was the name of the bus stop. All the buses stopped there. Greyhounds and all the buses stopped there. That was a mafia place, I think. But yeah. Then the next stop was Naval Academy. And there we sat on the bus and waited for the kids. I never was in it, but I was there, and the kids and the teachers, they all went in and toured the academy. And then we went to Washington for 3 days. And at night after supper, they did not eat in the hotel. They ate in a cafeteria. So we had to take them twice a day. We had or 3 times. That sounds extreme, to the cafeteria, and then go tour, and then at 6 or 7 o'clock, we had to pick them all up at the hotel and go down. For instance, the first day was usually the trip down the Potomac to Mount Vernon on one of them old-fashioned boats.
Paddle wheel.
Yeah. And they would ride, and we wouldn't go along. I think I went along once. You could if you wanted to, but the drivers used to just relax and take care. But we had to wait till midnight till our boat get back, and take him back to the hotel, and then be down at the thing at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8.
How many years did you do that?
Oh, well, you did it only in the spring. You didn't do it, you know,
During harvest season.
When the high school kids take their trips and stuff.
Right, right.
And you know what we got for them 3 days?
How much?
$45.
$45.
Yeah.
For 3 days.
For 3 days.
Oh, wow.
But now you got your meal.
Yeah.
You never had to pay hotel. You never had to pay.
So this was back in the 40s?
No,
50s?
this was in the 50s.
50s.
Yeah, late 50s.
Late 50s.
In fact, I lived here and went down and did a trip or two. I was down there in the bus garage office when the news came that Martin Luther King was shot.
Right.
And when I sold real estate up here, which was about the same time, I was over in Union County at the Longenecker farm. You know where Black Run is, and Longenecker. It's not Longenecker anymore, but it's when you turn off of John Kelly on the Black Run Road.
Yeah.
And then you come to a place. If you want to go straight, you have to stop. If you turn right, you can keep going. You know where that spot is?
I have a pretty good idea where it is.
All right. Well, you go up towards the sawmill, towards what's their name? The big sawmill over there. Well, you go up that road another half mile, and there's a nice farm lays to the right. The people's name was. They moved over here to this county then, but that's where I was in the house showing that farm to some customer, and the lady of the house came running and she said that President Kennedy just got shot.
Wow.
That's where I was when that happened.
1963.
63, that's right.
Yep.
And my aunt died the same day. My aunt died the same day down there in Souderton. She left the farm then with the grandmother, and she built a house. She worked in a hosiery mill. She was a looper, not a knitter, but a looper.
Okay.
And she saved her money. Roosevelt was the greatest man that ever lived in her mind, because he raised the interest from 1 to 2%, you know, and she was saving her money and doubling your money. That's really something.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roosevelt. Oh, he was a godsend. And anyway, yeah, Pop and Mom got married, and Mom moved to the farm then. And it wasn't easy because these Germans are pretty headstrong, and Annie, the single sister of Dad, and the mother, grandfather had passed away, lived on the other side of the house. And of course Mom had her ways of raising this boy, and they had their ideas how to raise this boy. And but they got it done, and then we went to one-room school. That was over a mile and a half about.
That you had to walk to school.
I had to walk to school and didn't want to go to school. Oh man, cried and hollered and didn't want to go. And if my mother would walk with me up to the neighbors. They had 2 boys that went to school. So then I calmed down, and I got enough that I'd walk with them, but I hated school so bad.
I'm just curious, why did you hate it so much? Why? Why did you hate school?
Well, I was away from Mom. I was away from home, and it was all new, and you know, it was all. I didn't want to learn anything. I knew it all already at that time.
I can believe that.
But I can remember my daddy taking me on Dan. The horse's name was Dan. We had 4 horses: Dan, Dick, Tom, and Jim. And he took me on Dan because I believe the reason he took me on Dan, he had the most spirit and the most longest legs, and he was, I didn't like him. Tom was my favorite horse.
Because he went nice and slow, and you wanted to take your time getting to school.
Yeah, I suppose. He took me on horseback to school one snowy day, and the drifts were so deep that the snow rubbed on the belly of the horse.
Wow.
Now, not all over, but we went through drifts like that to get me to school. And don't forget, the teacher had to be there an hour or half an hour before to start the fire to make it warm in there.
Right.
And we always liked, the boys always liked if the teacher would say, you and you go get water. You know, the water jug was empty.
Right.
We had to take a bucket down to the neighbors, which was only, closer than the church yet. But we'd go to the pump, you know, and fill that up and then pour it in and that was our water for the drinking water in school. And well, that Weiler School, the school teacher's name was Irvin Beidler, and he became Norman Berge's first office manager or office worker. Norman Berge, there were two Morgan Berges, father and son. This is the old Norman Berge. He started a garage in Franconia along 113 in 1924. And my father-in-law, Paul Durstein, he was the second mechanic that Norman Berge hired in 1924. But anyway, today Berge's, you know, they own the truck stop down here now. And my cousins, they would work there, the Gottschalks, and they're all gone but one. Her single name was Pearl Gottschall, and no, that's wrong. Her mother's name was Catherine Gottschall, my mother's sister. Her daughter is Pearl Schuick, and she lives now in the Telford nursing home. Still goes quilting once a month to a church in Quakertown. Still does quilting at 101.
Oh my.
She's 101 and still does quilting.
Wow.
Yeah. So she's the only one of my first cousins left. I had 57, all on my mother's side, none on my dad's side. Very unusual. Very unusual, but anyway, I got to this part of the world, and I made a good choice. It was good people here, and friendly, and
so you came to.
I came here.
1963. When did you buy Russ? When you first came here, what kind of work did you do?
Driving bus and farming. When I wasn't doing that, I was farming.
When did you buy Russ Biddle's farm?
That was, I think, it was October of 63.
I have a question. Was there a house that lived there on Swamp Road?
Yeah.
There was back there in that wooded area?
That was two farms at one time.
Okay. Because Harry Hoy and I were talking about that. He says there was a house there, I swear. There was a house right there, but close to that culvert.
Not when I had it. There was only a corn crib.
Okay.
When I bought it, there was stones, a lot of stones we had to clean up, you know, to farm it. But there were stones from a foundation, and there was a corn crib that we took down. But when Risser bought it, Carl asked him what he's going to do with that schoolhouse. Well, Risser said, I guess, doze it down, and
no.
Carl says, no, you're not.
No.
You're not. And so he, and the guy that did the deal, Robert Nice from down home, he said, if I want to buy a property, I'm going to get Carl to negotiate, he said, because he's a negotiator. And so he kept the schoolhouse.
Good.
Just had it surveyed, and it wasn't sold with it. But when Iowa bought it, there was a lot of trouble with it because it had gone back. The deed said, or the agreement, that when it was no longer used for a schoolhouse, it should go back to the owners that, you know, gave the land for, or the neighboring owners where that land came from. Right. And Porter Wagner was the attorney in Danville, and it didn't cost me anything, but they had to submit a deed and get that. It's in the courthouse, you know, that it was returned to me, or however that was. I don't know.
Well, my grandfather's sister, Flora Schuyler, taught there in that school in about 1906.
Your grandfather's
sister.
Sister.
She'd be my great aunt. Taught at that
And
school.
where did they come from? Do you know where the Schuyler's came from?
The Schuyler's originally came from Netherlands, Holland. They're Dutch.
Okay.
Schuler or Schuyler is Dutch. Yep. It's pronounced, I guess, because in German the U is pronounced I. It's Schuyler, not Schuler. Is that right? You would know that.
Before they came here, do you know where they were, or did they come there from?
Jerseytown.
Jerseytown.
And then Jersey, New Jersey, Jerseytown, and then this area. Yep. And that farm where I live right now, I lived there, my father lived there, my grandfather grew up there, my great-grandfather, William Schuyler, who was sheriff in Montour County back in around 1920. And then his father, Thomas B. Schuyler, lived there. He was a farmer and a carpenter. So it goes back 5 generations.
5 generations, my goodness.
Yep.
Are you doing the plowing or the neighbor?
Plowing up there. Did you see my plowing job?
Yeah, sure.
I tell you what, that plowed hard. Well, I figured I didn't need it no more. I won't only have that 17 acres there. I sold off that land down on Schuyler Road, and then up there on the county line, I sold that piece off too.
Yeah. Who owns that on Schuyler Road where them trucks are?
Well, I wish you would buy it. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. It was bought by a trucker by the name of O'Donnell. He lived down on Plotz Road, down where John Plotz used to live.
Okay.
Plotz Road. He bought it, and then he passed away. So his wife owns it now, and she's just letting it go. I asked her, I said, would you be interested in selling that back, you know, and she said no, she wants to keep it, but they're not doing anything. What I'm concerned about is it's going to start growing up in multiflower rows and shrub.
I never forget the day we farmed that, and Carl went in there, and that 6620 combine, and he went down toward the woods and turned around and come back, and
barely made it out of there, huh?
Barely made it out of there.
Yep.
Boy.
Yeah, it's wet down in there. Yep. So in '63 you started farming?
64, really.
64. Did you have any plans of building up a grain storage?
No.
At that time,
I was going to make hay. I was going to,
okay.
You know, whatever. I filled that barn over there at the school. I filled that with hay right up to the top. Because that's what the farmer had in the field, so I did plow 1 or 2 fields, put wheat in it in the fall of 63. I owned that over there before. I owned the Biddle farm.
What farm is that?
There over toward the high school, there on the bank,
Oh, okay.
where Lester and Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. I owned that first.
I had no idea you owned that.
Yeah.
Where Lester Martin used to live.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I owned that. And I remember Stout Agency, what was his name? In Dort was the realtor. He had a brother. The widow owns this land in Turbotville that don't sell. You know, there's 30 acres there or 20 acres across from the dollar.
Okay. Yeah. They want quite a bit of money for it too.
But Morris Page owned that farm and he wanted to sell it. Morris, that's what he did. He'd buy a place and he'd move and he'd get a little more than he paid for it, and then we got it, we bought it, and the settlement was in the courthouse with Press Davis and the realtor, what was his name? Lived in Dort right there near the store, across the street. Anyway, he's well known around here.
Fairman.
Oh, but before him.
Before Fairman.
You know the boy the big guy in the town store that drives butcher, that big boy, that long and anchor boy in the back butcher shop. It's his father-in-law.
Okay.
His brother. They were both in the realty. This big boy's father-in-law, he developed a few areas there around the school north of Watsontown, and they were in that real estate a lot.
So you farmed and raised hay.
Yeah.
And when did you, and if that was 64, Arden was doing pretty good down here at the mill at that time.
Well, I don't know. I suppose he was.
In the 60s. And I think a good part of, no, wait a minute, Ben Hur still was running that operation in 64. Ben didn't sell it to Arden until 66.
Oh, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, Ben Hur still had that. Yeah, it was 66 that Arden bought that.
Well, now, where did Arden, whose cows did he mind? You know where the lady wanted to, was that your ground that she bought? Along the creek, and she couldn't do not. She wanted to put goats in it, and she can't. It's wetland. She can't do nothing with it.
I don't know anything about that.
You know, they mowed a little bit there along the road, along the county line. They mowed a little bit. Somebody.
Oh yeah, I see that.
That piece in there.
I have no idea what
it was never yours.
No, that was.
Well, Arden said he used to mind cows in that meadow.
Warren Cotner had cows.
Warren Cotner had cows.
Yeah, back then they kept the stream dredged out. They would clean the stream out every couple of years and keep the water flowing.
Oh.
And they pastured cows in there. But when they stopped doing that, it started backing up and getting swampy in there. They stopped cleaning it out. So, yeah.
Well.
No, I own, you know where that shed sits there, that metal? I own the land on the other side.
Okay.
In that wooded area. And then someone else owned on the other side of the shed. Yeah, I don't know what they're planning to do.
We used to call him Boy Yeah. What was his name? Lived there in that house where the shed is.
I don't know.
Or you remember him.
The guy that owned the shed?
What?
Which guy? The guy.
Right where the new shed is,
Right.
there was a house there.
Oh, Beachel. Ed Beachel.
Ed Beachel. Boy, yeah, we used to call him.
Okay.
You'd say something, he'd always say, boy, yeah, boy, yeah.
Okay. Yep, Ed Beachel. Yep. And you know who used to live there before Beachel's lived there? This is going back to the 1940s. Al St. Clair. Al and Ruth St. Clair lived there for a few years.
St. Clair.
Yeah. He lived there for a few years before he came down to right below me there and rented that farm and was milking cows in there. And then I guess around 1970 or he moved up to where Sonny St. Clair is now, where John is.
There, where Sonny is, not where he was.
Yeah, he moved where Sonny is, and they farmed that. And then when Sonny got old enough to get married, then Al moved down to the other place.
Okay.
Yep. So when did you decide to start putting silos up, grain silos?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I wanted one of them. Well, Abe Ziegler down here, guy got killed. He put a silage dryer system in, and after he had it in, he said, you know, I think I would have put it, if I had to do it over again, I'd put an easy dry in. Oh, what's an easy dry? Well, it's got the dryer on the top and it. Oh, that's something different. So I checked into it, and yeah, I thought it would work good, I think. And it did. It really did work good. They still make them, but GSI stole the patents, or they after so long the patents run out, and then they build them themselves. And never had the idea of getting in the grain business. It just was so slow. Arden wouldn't unload. You know, there'd be wagons sitting there for a couple of days or longer, and we were.
Oh, they'd had them lined up all the way out to the county line.
We
road.
used to work faster than that, so I suppose that had something to do with it. And but we always got along good, and we belonged to the same. We had a little stock club for a while. Fred Diego and the two Wallermeyers and Arden and I, and we'd always meet up at Arden's house and discuss. But we lost money more than we.
Oh, a stock market club.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'd invest in grains, you know, and they depended on Arden and me to help them, and we guessed wrong and.
He used to always talk about the boys in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't a big fan. So you put your first grain dryer in.
Yep.
That was probably when, about 1970?
Yeah, 71, 72. I worked for Kepler's for 4 years. I worked for Kepler Farms.
So what year did Carl come along?
What?
Your son Carl.
What year was he born?
Yeah.
I think in 64.
So about the same time you bought this place.
No. 54.
Oh, 54.
Yeah, he's
in his 60s, right?
Yeah, he's 68.
So he was about 10 years old when you moved in up here.
Yeah, he was 10 years old. I left the combine down there because I had customers, you know, that depended on me. And I said, well, I'm gonna move, but I'm gonna come back, cut your wheat, and then I'm gonna move my combine up here. And when we went down, I took Carl along, and he's some boy.
You once told me you never would have gotten to where you are today if it weren't for Carl.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I went over there. I lived here, I think. Yeah, I lived here. And I went over there. Boy, there's the Oliver tractor sitting in the lawn of the house, the lawn, in the morning. You know, I went over. And there's a rope going up to the leg. Oh my, I knew what that meant. That means the belt tore. And he's trying to fix it.
Right.
He was not in bed that night. He was not in bed. He worked all night by himself. Why didn't you call me? Well, I didn't want to bother you. He said how many times he went up and down that leg.
Wow.
So he said, I knowed if we wouldn't have it fixed, we couldn't take corn the next day. So then I helped him finish, but he was virtually done there. And then, yeah, he was, and somebody want to borrow something. You know, he never turned them down. I never knowed him to turn anybody down.
So how old was Carl when he started getting involved in the business? Right out of high school?
Well, he was 10 when we moved, and then he went to high school, and he was going to be a pilot. There's a school in Miami that trains pilots, and that was where he was going to go, and then
he's too tall to be a pilot, isn't he?
Then he worked for Lenker. He helped me some at Kepler's, not much, but he worked for Lenker. Lenker was a builder, and it's where he learned his building stuff. And Lenker lived in Dornside. Lenker built in the old Farmer's Best. You remember the old Farmer's Best?
Yep.
Lenker built that fireplace in there, and that beautiful stonework. That's where Carl learned all that stuff. And Lenker liked him because he didn't need a ladder. He could do the ceilings, you know, and they build a house or whatever. He could do the ceilings without a ladder, and he could just reach up there and touch it, you know. Then he worked for Snyder, Bob Snyder, and Mike and him got to be very good friends, and that's where he learned farming and snap bean growing and tomato growing and all that stuff. And then he got tired of trucking, and so then I needed him for putting bins up. By that time I was selling some bins and elevator legs, and then he didn't want to do that, so then I did it myself for a little while, and Joe Hostetler would help me, and I'd get different guys.
So you were selling the bins?
Yeah,
storage bins?
Yeah, I sold Kepner up there, you know. I sold him a dryer, and I sold him as far as Center Hall and down in Snyder County, and
okay.
Yeah, easy dries and storage bins, and out in Belleville we put up a whole system for Ivan. Yeah.
That's quite a nice dairy farm area out in Belleville.
Yeah.
That's a nice farm area.
Yeah.
Big Valley. They call it Big Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, Big Valley. You're familiar. I suppose you're familiar.
Well, I've taken some Amish out
there.
Yeah.
All right. You drive in. You know where you go into. You know where you turn right to go to the airport.
Okay.
Well, out there a little bit ways on the right is a grain system. We put that in.
Okay.
And
so when did you start putting more grain bins up for yourself?
Well, as we needed them, we always got them full and needed more space, and so.
At this time, when you started putting more up, Carl was active helping you then?
Yeah, he was, but he got to dislike it. Why I don't know, but I know he's glad I pushed him pretty hard to buy that place up there where
Where is that now?
yeah. See that him and his sister, I had 6 children, and my aunt, the maiden lady that built a house in Souderton, she had an estate. Then she owned a house next door. She owned a house and had tenants there and stuff. And I was the executor of her estate, but her remainder went to my children, and they all had an account, and 4 of them used it to go to college, but Carl and Regina, they never went to college. So Carl used his to buy that place up there, and
okay.
And then he changed it the way he liked it, and I think it was a good deal.
So you built that farm up to, you ended up with like 11 or 12 silos, storage bins there?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then you sold it all?
Yeah, it's not like it was when Carl had it. Boy, he'd clean around them bins and clean that up, and he's just a worker.
They're letting it slide a little bit?
What?
They're letting it go a little bit, you think?
Yeah, a little bit.
So you had 4 daughters, 2 sons,
Yep.
and you have a slew of grandchildren?
Yeah, 12 or 14 or somebody. Steve's youngest boy, he lives in Florida. He adopted 4 Indians from an American Indians foster.
Wow.
And he adopted, they're all brothers, 4 of them. And they teach them and make them listen, and they're good kids.
When did he move there?
He moved there about 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Okay.
He lived in Minneapolis or in
Okay.
Minnesota. That's where he met his wife, and
Did he move back to Minnesota, or did he move? You said he moved back to Minnesota. Steve
moved back to Delaware.
Delaware. That's
Yeah,
right.
this is the 3rd time he moved to the shore.
So is Carl retired now too?
Oh no.
No?
No. He's busier than ever.
With the farming operation.
Yeah, and they hauling tomatoes now. They're hauling tomatoes for Forman.
Oh, okay.
2 of the trucks haul tomatoes.
And your grandson John he's pretty he built that house over there by the
Yeah,
by the new silo.
he loves his tractor pulls and stuff, and I wouldn't encourage it, but his father does, so I stay out, and he was number 2 the other day somewhere or someplace, and just for me to sit there, I enjoy it, but to sit there for 4 hours for a 30-second thrill is just not enough to.
I was over there one day when they were working on that John Deere.
Okay.
The one they used for the pull.
Yeah, they're always tinkering with it, and
Yeah.
Fred Yeagle, he enjoys it too, and he could get more money anywhere else, but he sticks around, and
Yeah.
Lappy the same way. Lappy's a good fella. Yeah.
And your daughters?
My daughters are scattered all over. My oldest daughter just got back from Alaska. She called me.
What's her name?
Rosanna.
Is she the one that's like a missionary?
She was for 20 years. She was in Africa.
Okay.
Hess is her name now.
She's your oldest.
She got married and came back, or came back and got married.
And then who's next?
Carl is the old. Steve is the
Yeah,
oldest.
it's Carl, Steve, Rosanna.
No, Carl is 3rd.
Okay.
Steve is 1st.
Okay.
Steve, Rosanna, Carl, Regina. She lost her husband. She's a widow. She bought a house in New Columbia.
Oh, she lives in New Columbia.
And then Becky and Rhonda.
Wow.
Thanks for coming.
You have lived a full life, young man.
Yeah, well, I'd like to get to my birthday. That's 1st of November. That'd be 92.
What message do you have to give to these kids of yours? What do you want to tell them? If you could stand in front of them right now, we'll say it near the end of your sojourn here.
I would, of course, I'm a Christian and believe in the Christian principles of the Anabaptists, pretty much. You know, the history of the Anabaptists who were put to death in Switzerland and drowned and burned at the stake, and that's our history.
Yeah.
And then they forced them out. Actually, the church, the existing church, and forced them to leave, and they landed up in Germany and in Holland, and parts of that Palatinate along the Rhine River has been, part of it has been France, and then for 100 years it belonged to Germany, and then so many years it belonged. They fought over that, and they were in there, the Mennonites and the Anabaptists, and Menno Simons actually is what the church is named after, and he was a Catholic priest in Holland, and left that work and followed the ones who, different ones. And
what message do you want to leave?
What message
to your
do
kids?
I want to leave? That they should follow the Holy Bible, which is the basis of our belief and our it has been tried to be destroyed so many times, and yet it seems impossible to do it. And I think it is the Word of God, put by man into a book, but I think it has the answers to most of the problems of family life and civil life and education and government and whatever. I think it has the answer if we're not too stubborn, or whatever the word would be.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I think that.
Well, thank you very much, Henry.
Yeah.
You did a fantastic job. You have an incredible memory. You should have been a history teacher.
Yeah, I would love.
You would have loved being.
I love history.
Yes, I can tell.
You know, geography in school was my favorite. You know, there was a time I could mention every county in Pennsylvania and the county seat, and every state in the United States I could, and the capitals I could do it, but I don't think I can anymore. But I loved history and geography.
Yeah, me too.
English was never very.
Well, you'd have been a fantastic history teacher.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much there, Henry.
Yeah, well, you think of something else while you call me or whatever.
Okay.